Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. Today we sit down to analyse the episode Aftermath, or The Aftermath, from Legend of Korra, or Locke, as some people call it. Book 1, Air, still in the first season. Don't worry, we've not jumped ahead. That'd be weird. This is the one in which the gang, having just, been attacked by Amon, try to have some chill time and hang out at Asami's awesome mansion when Korra discovers Asami's dad might not be so awesome, and investigates the possibility that Hiroshi Soto is maybe a bad guy, much to the frustration of her friends who think she's insane. Unfortunately, it turns out she is correct. We have some dramatic daughter realizing her dad might be a psychopath stuff. We have a Star Wars, like she Darth Vader's her. He's like, join me and we shall rule the world, and she's all like, nah mate. We get that scene. That's all happening in the episode. Ends with the whole gang being a bit dejected. Like another week of just the gang being miserable by the end of the episode. Everyone but Bolin, who seems singularly unfazed by everything. How are you feeling, Chris?
I really felt that at the end. I really felt like, oh, this is quite a downbeat, depressed ending, isn't it?
Yeah, well, they keep losing. I mean, I don't want to. Excuse me, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, Chris, but they keep losing. It's not working out. Yeah. So, how did you feel about the episode on the whole?
I really liked it. I was quite surprised when it started. I thought we were going to be like the immediate aftermath. So I was quite surprised when it started and we're sort of a little bit of time has passed.
Sure.
But I really enjoyed it. In your recap, you haven't given the most important thing, which is the incredible callback to the cabbage stuff.
Yes.
No, my cabbage cooperation. Fucking brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, this episode is, despite being quite a dark one, particularly the ending. This episode has so many great jokes. This is a bit of a standout episode for comedy.
It is, but I don't know whether one of the best ones is actually one of the worst, because I don't know whether Bolin being like, do you think your dad knows about the secret tunnel? Is just a bit like, come on, Bolin, like, read the room.
But he also has the amazing making the butler dry him down and then immediately jumping back in the water. Bolin wanting a makeover. That's Nadia said her biggest disappointment with this episode was that Bolin didn't get his makeover. That's all really
that's
funny.
the real crime.
But yeah, you think your dad knows about this tunnel is very good. There's a easy bit, it's Bolin being Bolin, but there's just so many moments of him being hilarious in this episode. Like when they come back, he needs the loo, and he like just runs in, going beep beep. I don't know. It's every little detail about Bolin this week just seemed on point. And I agree with you totally. Like, do you think your dad knows about the tunnel? Is a bit like, read the room, buddy. But he's such a sweetheart. It's not malicious. So I don't know. It's quite funny.
Yeah, that's fair. It's very good. I really enjoyed this episode. I think it was quite gripping. It was quite fun. We had it was another episode that managed to achieve a lot. We had a bit of levity with like the car race scene. Yes. We had all the stuff at the end. I think they've done such a good job with Asami's character. I never once thought she was going to join her father. But I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean that in a good way, because I think, she...
I had that question for you, because I watched it this time and thought there really is a chance someone could buy that, I think. But
I think someone could.
There was no moment in which you thought she was going to do that?
No, not at all personally, but I think someone absolutely could. I just think they've... Yeah, it just felt like it was going the way it was going, and that was a good thing.
Did you not think it might be a sort of a Zuko thing where she... Because I also think the show almost takes advantage of... There were a couple of points in Last Airbender where you thought Zuko had turned good, but then he made the bad choice again. They did that a few times. Particularly, I'm thinking at the end of season 2, when you think Zuko's come round and he ends up lightning Aang in the back, literally.
I think that could be so. He ends up being a bit of a cock, I think, is the concise summary of that moment.
Yeah. So, with that in mind, like, does that not give you more rapport with Asami? I get obviously not with yourself, but do you think that the show benefits from almost knowledge of how these writers are willing to make a character that may ultimately be redeemed do bad things and then atone for that? I feel like that makes it feel more likely because also dramatically speaking, maybe one of the more interesting things they could have done there is have Asami go to the dark side, so to speak. It certainly would have. Mixed up things. I'm glad they went the way they went. I like Asami as a character. I think she's interesting. I think she's arguably more interesting than either Mako or Bolin right now, which is quite funny because Mako and Bolin were kind of introduced to be like the co-leads, the Sokka and Katara essentially. But in reality, Mako is kind of like a bad copy of, not a bad copy, like a less interesting version of Zuko. He mostly seems to exist to be part of the love triangle, and Bolin is obviously the sort of the comic relief. He's kind of playing the Sokka role, and while this show, I'll tease now, does do some really interesting things with their characters in later seasons, I feel like in looking at this season specifically, what is either of them doing in terms of their own plot? Like, it's pretty thin, right? Marco
there's
seems
just not a lot of conflict there. They're not torn between anything. They're not, right. Other than love triangle bullshit, take a shot episode.
Uh-huh.
They've not really had any conflict, or they're not being pulled in different directions quite like Korra and Asami now is.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's why.
Yeah, I guess excuse me. Man, this cough is literally. I'm enjoying the idea that this cough is going to follow me through the entire series. Because we're recording these quite quickly because we're trying to get ahead. So we're recording it's for those who are keeping track. Like when we started, we were in late December. It's early January. We've done most of these in the space of a couple of weeks, which, in terms of, I think the content has been fine. I don't think we're burnt out or anything. I don't think we've overdone it. But because I had COVID for a part of that. And now I'm going to mostly have recorded these while sort of recovering from that. I think I'm going to be coughing in most of these episodes, which is very sad. So apologies to the listeners that I sound sick and there might be some coughing. Some of it I'm going to be able to edit out. Some of it I'm not, because it's going to happen in moments like that. Anyway, so Asami having her links to essentially one of the villains now, because it makes a lot of sense. It's actually a surprise. I didn't work it out the first time I watched it. Evidently you didn't theorize on it either, but actually the Equalists having all these weapons, at no point did I ever go, where are they getting them from? I never stopped to wonder where all this tech was coming from. And if I had, it wouldn't have taken me long to figure it out.
That's a brilliant point, yeah.
At no point, but you know what though, Chris? You might not remember even having said this, but 2 or 3 episodes ago, we introduced her father. You did say they might make him a villain. You did call that.
I did remember saying that as I was watching this. Yeah. But I didn't feel particularly. I wasn't planting a flag, so I wasn't like that's definitely the case.
It was a good call.
Yeah,
it was a good call. You sort of you puzzled out the story, but you were sort of like, well, the only way this I can't remember how you did it, but you sort of it was like a game of elimination. You kind of went well, if they're not going to do this with him, then the only real way for this story to go is for him to maybe be a villain. You kind of I feel like you just sort of narratively narrowed it down to it must be that, because what else is this character here for? So you weren't wrong. But yeah, realistically, I don't the whole speech Aman gave in the previous episode was about how technology has leveled the playing field and allowed this equalist movement to rise, right? That's what's kicked it off, is that they're on an even playing field because he's got these weapons and this tech. And at no point on any viewing have I ever this is obviously on the first viewing is the important one, because obviously after that I knew anyway, but how I didn't put that together and how viewers generally don't is kind of astonishing to me, because it's so clear. Yeah, they're getting the tech from somewhere. The only person we know that makes tech, we'd had hints that there's a Cabbage Corp out there. We don't know what they do, So yeah, it's Soto. It's Hiroshi Soto. He's kind of been placed as kind of a Ford, like a Henry Ford character. You know, he had the means and the technology and the advancement and the factories. It seems insane that never occurs to you. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm overstating it, but I think it's I can't decide if that's really clever writing or just like me being an idiot. It's one or the other. Probably a bit of both.
No, I think it's quite clever writing. They don't be, and also I think the viewer is also getting used to the notion of technology in this world. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So you're sort of not thrown by, but every time technology comes up, a little part of your brain is still thinking, "Oh yeah, there's technology in this world now." Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So maybe that's something to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. It's. I don't know if it is just one of those things as well, where like, you know, as a as a premise, villains have technology. I guess a lot of other shows have done that without making it part of the plot. Do you know what I mean? Other shows have just like, you know, where did the villains get their weapons in any other number of shows that we've watched? They don't often explain it, I guess. So maybe you're not really thinking that's going to be part of the story long term.
Yeah, maybe, and yeah,
like
but it does. But you are right. It is mind blowing. It is mind blowing. They hide it. It's crazy.
Yeah. So with that in mind, when Korra started to suspect, were you immediately just like, well, that's right, then he's a villain, or was there an element of, did you think the show was going to zigzag on you? Did you think there was any point where it was going to turn out he was just nice and normal and someone else was doing something sinister, maybe with his factories, or did you immediately just go, well, the lead character suspects him of wrongdoing, he's probably a bad one?
Yeah, I think the only moment that might have got me thinking, oh, maybe not, was when he was so open to them searching, etc. But, you know, I mean, he sounded so villainous when he was like, it's brought us more time. Like, he sounded more villainous on the phone. And I just felt it was more interesting to make him part of it. So, yeah, maybe at first, but maybe for a moment, during that scene. But I was fairly confident he was going to prove to be the bad guy, or a bad guy rather.
Did you enjoy the whole like he set them up to be captured sort of situation? Because I thought that was quite clever. So for those who don't remember the episode specifically, while they're investigating, they get handed a little note, and it's like a proper like. It's a proper like was it Deep Throat, the guy hiding in the car park, like it was just like they had all the secrets. There's a guy like it's all going down at Cabbage Corp. He hands Korra a note and they're like, oh, underneath this mansion there's a secret factory, and they go there and like they get there and it's that is there, and they think they're going down all confident like they go down there all confident, and Hiroshi's already waiting for them with his new equipment to sort of almost test it on them and capture them. And that employee that was all pretending to be like disillusioned with the Equalists was actually had done it on purpose. It was all a trap. I thought that was pretty clever, but I was curious on your perspective.
Yeah, that bit surprised me more than anything else probably in the episode. The fact that was deliberate and a deliberate point, especially because when they get to the workshop, it looks like they've run away. It looks like they've bolted and taken their stuff. So that bit was a surprise. And actually, to be honest with you, I didn't particularly. I mean, maybe if I'd have thought about it more, I would have done. But Asami appearing right at the end there, because it almost seemed. I almost, why leave her behind if you're going to then do that? Would be the thought in my head. So when she reappeared, I actually thought that was quite a nice surprise too.
Yeah, I got a question about that, because I thought that scene where they make the excuse for her to not go down with Mako or Bolin was weak sauce. Just all over. Like, what a weird bit of logic. It felt really forced, and like it didn't make sense. I'm going to go down and find out for you? So you don't have to, but you're gonna tell her, right? What you find. I don't understand how this benefits anyone separating like this. And also, I don't really get Asami, who's been pretty, like, capable and very much, a person with agency. Why she's going to be like, yes, oh boyfriend, I will wait here while you go down and find out. Like it's weird on all fronts. I don't know why Mako suggests it. I don't know why she accepts it. It feels out of character for both, and it feels like it's just put in there as an excuse to have them go down without her being there, so that when she shows up, it's like a surprise. But honestly, the explanation is such weak sauce. I'd just be like, she went down with him then. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, her going down with Mako and Bolin, and then having the moment where her father tries to coax her around, it plays out the same. Like, I don't think you gain a huge amount of shock from her appearing down there. Not enough to justify the two characters acting like someone just stuck their hand up their asses and controlled them like puppets and made them do shit they wouldn't normally do. I think both characters behave so peculiarly there. That scene doesn't make any sense to me.
I also found it a bit weird how it's like, even your mother wouldn't be able to metal bend through that, and I'm kind of like in that moment like, oh well, how are Bolin and Marco gonna get in then? And then it's just like, oh well, they tunneled in, so presumably anyone in that room could also, anyone that's an earthbender at least, could also do that.
Yeah, it's interesting, that, isn't it? Because what do they say? He said, not even your renowned mother could bend metal so pure. So yeah, so there's basically he makes tanks. For those who don't remember, one of the things he's been developing are like sort of big mech tank robot things that are made out of I've forgotten what metal he says they're made out of, but it's a metal that basically apparently cannot be bent. Which I was like, that's fine, I guess. Like, adamantium, unobtainium, I don't know. There's always some like special magic metal that is impervious to whatever in sort of these science fiction-y sort of fantasy stuff. So I don't know. I was fine with that. I mean, I don't know. Did you feel that was a bit of a stretch, or?
Well, just the way they sort of had to write. I almost didn't want them to give a. Why they were still being circled. They were still. I don't know why they felt the need to set up. Oh, you can't get out if Marco and Bolin were trying to then get in. I haven't got any problem with it being an impenetrable metal. Like, everything's evolved. It makes sense that they would create that. It was more, I almost didn't really know why it was necessary to set up that Marco and, that they would struggle to get out, because it then just made it a bit clunky when Marco and Bolin just easily just create a tunnel and just appear.
Well, see, I was wondering about that. Did they create a tunnel, or did they just enter through like an existing vent? Like, because it seemed like a panel. I don't think they bent their way in, because Bolin can't metal bend anyway. So, I assumed they just found an entrance through the ventilation or sewer system. I assumed.
Oh, maybe my interpretation was that they somehow they earth bent a tunnel underneath the metal. Maybe
but then they open like a panel in the metal to get in.
Yeah, he's just a really good earthbender. He's just neat.
No, but what they were saying was the metal that the room was made out of is unbendable, even if you could bend it. But Marco's a firebender. So
I viewed it as that. I viewed that,
and I'll confirm for you now that Bolin is not a metal bender.
No. I'm not. My interpretation of it is that big, and this is, and maybe the fact that we're going back and forth on it shows that like just don't include it in. My interpretation of it was that the metal sheet that kind of went up and formed the door and the wall is this impenetrable metal. So then they did that classic, well, we can't go through it, let's go under it. So then the ground, which was just earth, they tunneled through. Was my if that's wrong, fair enough. But like that, I'm not saying he metal bent. I'm saying my interpretation watching the episode was he tunneled under.
Yeah, and I think it's even lazier than that. I think it's so. I think you've given it more credit and thought than the writers have. I think they literally open a hatch to get in, and it's like, oh, they found another route. Like that is literally, I think, what the episode wants you to think.
And that's what I'm saying at the core of this. Don't bother giving an explanation about the metal because they're surrounded. We don't need to know that the building's it's made of, unless they're trying to introduce that concept. I just think it's kind of, maybe that's more for the robots. Maybe that's more saying why they can't metal bend the robots. But
Correct.
yeah, it just felt a bit.
But that's because that's the thing is that what they open in the floor, it's a metal floor. They open like a hatch specifically. So unless they knew that was there, tunneling underground wouldn't make any sense because how would you get in up from underneath? Because the whole thing is made of that metal. So I don't see.
I thought it was just the wall. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, they come. It seems to be some sort of hatch they open that they come up from underneath. But yeah, I agree with your point as well, which is like it's clearly not very clear, and it's clearly been like brushed over. Like, oh, we've trapped the heroes in there, but we also need 2 more to join them. But then I just think like, why did we do that? Why did we leave Mako, Bolin, and Asami upstairs? Like, there's choices in this episode that just muddle things for no reason, like that. But like the clunkiness of how they get down there, because the whole idea is that Korra, Tenzin, and Lin are trapped, right? That's the premise. He's all like, "Ha, this is a trap. You've all been trapped. Ha, I'm evil. You know, the door is shut behind you, and it's made of a metal that you can't bend your way out of. Lin, Beifong, ha, even your mother, blah blah blah." But then you've got the writers clearly wanted Mako and Bolin to go down there to help. So, okay, cool. But then, practically speaking, you have to make an excuse for that. They couldn't think of one, so they just show them coming through a hatch and let your imagination do the rest, I guess. However you want to interpret what that means. And then they deliberately have Mako leave Asami behind for her to then follow somehow, and somehow get in the same route. How did Asami get in? Did she go the same way? Did she come up through that hatch? I don't even remember if we see that. Like, it's all very muddled, and I think it's all. Is it not all just simply solved with they all went down together?
Well, I don't know if that then, is her dad then concentrating on her and less likely to reveal, like, that his evil plan. Like, I kind of get it, but I agree with you. It feels awfully clunky as a result.
Yeah, it's such a shame because I think so much about this episode really works, and I think the final act maybe needed a bit of an extra draft just to sort of like smooth out some of the practical elements, just like where the characters are when stuff. Because I mean, all right, even if you don't want to have Bolin, because I think it makes a certain amount of sense that Bolin, Mako, and Asami would come down. Lin's on official police business. They literally live there. It's in their interest to assist, Sato. They could, for all Lin knows, those 3 could be involved. We know they're not, the viewers. But from a police perspective, you wouldn't let people who live in the home come round on the search with you. You just wouldn't. No, I don't mind them getting initially left behind. So I guess the answer is do that bit, but don't have the whole they leave Asami behind when Mako and Bolin go down. Because that's the bit that's like,
yeah,
really, like that's the clunkiest part of it. And maybe
but you have to then make her make more of a choice as to whether she's going to join them early. But then again, maybe that choice is more powerful if her joining them is what then frees, Tenzin and Korra.
Right.
She's part of that rescue. Not only is she refusing to join, she's also then part of that, those 3 work together and she's part of the rescue.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's how they escape. Because at the moment, Mako and Bolin save them, and then Asami just helps carry them out. Why do we need to do that? Like you say, there's just maybe some structuring stuff with that last fight, but it doesn't deter the episode. It doesn't. Yeah. I don't think it. This isn't like love triangle bullshit episode where we've got legitimate complaints. We're just sort of talking through that last sequence, and there's stuff that maybe could have made it a bit tighter.
Yeah. I found out the name of the metal, by the way. It's solid platinum is how he describes it. So it's platinum. That's the thing that metal benders apparently cannot bend. So there you go.
There you
Let's
go.
talk about some other parts of the episode, because there's a bunch of stuff we should get through. How did we like Hiroshi Sato's backstory then? Do we like the Agni Kai stuff? So the Agni Kai are one of the triads, and they're like one of the bending mobs in the city. They killed his wife. That's why Asami doesn't have a mother. We dealt with that in a couple episodes ago. That it was just her and her dad. And it's one of the reasons she sort of connected with Mako. So that logic for him being on the side of the Equalists, that track for you, that work as a backstory for Sato.
Yeah, I think it's a shame we didn't get to explore it in more depth, or maybe like it wasn't more of a reveal as opposed to something being told to us by another character. But I think it tracks as motivation. I think it makes sense. I didn't have a problem with it from that perspective at all.
Did you think? Because I wondered about this, like the way they did that was partly just because on the grounds that, like, the idea that like they wanted us to think Asami might be on board with it too. So like revealing it that way, because if it had come out like through Asami being honest about it,
that makes sense.
She would never say that if she was on side. So by having it come from a third party, it leaves it more open for the possibility that Asami is kind of in on it, and that's why she's not revealed the reason her mother passed away. Whereas if they've heard it from Asami, and it's been used as a character moment, which would be good for Asami, because she's an interesting character. Certainly one of the more interesting characters the show has right now, because Korra's in a bit of a middle space where she's still being a little bratty and forceful, but like the show's mostly proving her right, which is like, she's not going to learn her lesson in this scenario, Korra, because every time she's being bratty about something, she ends up being correct. Like she was bratty about not being allowed to take part in the pro bending, and that ended up helping her learning, which is a fun idea, and it worked. But like, damn it, she was right about that. Like, and she was really being forceful about Hiroshi Sato. She hasn't had any like losses yet on the grounds of like getting it wrong, and I think we're gonna need to humble the character that way soon.
Well, she did do the whole "let's end this, I'm going to fight you on my own," and then he whooped her ass and refused to even let her fight.
Yes, that's true.
So that was quite. I think that was quite. And that episode doesn't that episode end with her on the floor in balls of tears, crying on Tenzin's shoulder? I think she's had a bit of a loss there, I'd say.
That's fair. But yeah, so with Asami, like the parent stuff, I think it also is like. It's interesting enough, and while in this episode you kind of ache for it to be explored more, Asami's not gone anywhere. She's kind of with the gang now. If anything, she's staying with them on Temple Island. There's still plenty of time to explore it. I don't feel like we've been robbed of the chance to go into into more depth with her character going forward.
No, I think that's fair, and I think it's just I really like all the look, love triangle bullshit aside, although actually if they do it well, I won't object to that. I really like the four of them as a unit. I think it's a strong gang, and I like the idea that they're all together now, because it's hard to imagine a scenario where Mako and Bolin especially end up leaving Korra's company now and end up not staying with her, and I just assume the adventures will roll on, and they'll just stay as the gang going on those adventures. So that's exciting to me. I think they've done a really good job. Whilst you're right about Mako and Bolin in particular not having much to do of their own thing, and like I said earlier, I think it's because they don't have a lot of inner conflict. I still really like these four as a unit and their dynamic, etc.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because the show hasn't felt the need to, as of yet at least, create, because obviously it's all set in one location. See, when the show is like a traveling show, like the original one was, where it's like they're traveling the world, you have to have a gang, you have to have a team, because those are the people who are on the journey. Those are the people sort of going with you. Whereas in a world where we're in one location, the team can change and be different. And one week maybe Mako and Bolin are not with the gang, and one week they are, and maybe 1 week we gain 2 new characters, and then they go do their own thing, and there's room for that. But I do think, a show like this does also benefit from having like consistent characters that can be there every week that we can get to know slowly. Admittedly, they haven't really taken advantage of that yet, but what are we? 6 episodes in, 7 episodes in? That's fine. If this is a multi-season deal, then we've got plenty of time to explore these people. And in how much detail had we explored, Katara prior to?
Yeah, exactly.
Prior to God, my brain. Prior to we got into all her mother stuff in like the later seasons. So I'm not against the way they've structured that, and I think it's good that they are consistent. I mean, just leave you to a question I had for you though, Chris. At the beginning of this series, we talked about quite a lot how this show set itself apart generally, and how different it had been from the original Last Airbender show. Now we're sort of in the weeds of like a villain that needs to be stopped, and the Avatar and their friends sort of gathering to sort of best them. Has it become a more familiar show, and is that a bad thing? Or has it not become a familiar show, and it's still very different tonally, and it's doing its own thing, and it's like still separate enough that you're enjoying the fact that because we were complimenting that magic trick quite a lot in the early days of how they found such a different way to go. Does that still remain true for you?
Yeah, I think so, because we still don't really know who the villain is. We know one of his henchmen now, or one of their henchmen. We don't know. There's still a lot we don't know, and it's moving at such a pace. This show, it's almost burning through stories. The fact that pro bending is now shut down, and the last 2 episodes have been all about the pro bending arc of it all. And that was such a big part of early in the series as well. I think they're moving the goalposts so much that I'm definitely absolutely still entertained, and it does still. You're right, it feels more familiar now, but I'm not adverse to it feeling familiar. I wasn't even. I don't think either of us were even particularly. We were really impressed and praising that they didn't give us a carbon copy of Avatar. But neither of us particularly said we'd turn that off either. Right. If we're getting more of those vibes, fine. That's I haven't got a problem with that. I think the texture of the world is still also so different. Like, you can say the plots now feel like more like this, more the plots and the kind of maybe themes, the beats feel more Avatar, but my counter to that, Dan, would be this: in this episode, we had a robot fight and a car chase. They don't feel like The Last Airbender by any means. The texture of the world is still very different.
That's a good point, because a lot of people complain about the tech in this show and that it's advanced too far in too short a time. But I mean, isn't that what the Industrial Revolution did? Like, didn't tech move very quickly, very very suddenly? Isn't that the point? But also, we had tanks in Airbender. Like they were like air balloons and tanks. Like the tanks were not motorized. They were driven by benders, is my understanding. But
and quite a lot of time has passed. Like Katara's how old in this? Well, or just, I guess, in general, how much time has passed?
I think it's 70 years.
70 years. So yeah. Comparatively, that is roughly, from our point of view now, roughly 1955-ish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How much has technology changed between now and 1955?
Yeah.
Are you silent because I've done really bad maths?
No.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just double checking my 70 years thing. Is why I've gone a bit quiet. But I'm agreeing with you. I'm hearing what you're saying. You're right. That's a long time ago. So yeah, 100%.
But even if you were wrong, even if it was only 50 something years,
yeah,
we're still talking the 1970s versus now.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look at Legend of Korra, 70 years after the events of that series.
They didn't even have cheese in the pizza crust back then in the 70s.
You're right. Technology has given us so many great things that the world really benefits from, including cheese inside a pizza crust.
If I was listing, 50 great things that technology has given us, I'm probably putting stuffed crust pizza on there. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not a big stuffed crust guy, so...
I mean, you're not a huge cheese guy. That's what that is.
Well, I'm not a huge melted cheese guy. I love cheese. I eat a lot of cheese, like a worrying amount of cheese. But in terms of when it's melted, no, I like a little bit of melted cheese, but not a lot. When the pizza is like
you do actually,
thick and swimming in cheese, that's a lot.
I've got quite a cheese reputation, but I think you're probably. In terms of people I know genuinely getting through like a block of cheddar cheese, like it takes us quite a while to get through a block of cheddar cheese. Whereas I'm betting you're getting a new block of cheddar every 2 weeks.
Yeah, maybe even less sometimes.
Yeah,
Yep.
You have
because I eat a lot of cheese. I like a cheese sandwich. I'm very boring that way.
You are dull, but I'm joking.
That's true.
I don't think there's nothing dull about a cheese sandwich.
I think it's pretty. Yeah, I think the cheese sandwich speaks for itself.
But dull is cheap and easy. You say making a cheese sandwich. I hear not blowing all your money on Deliveroo.
Yeah, I mean that is often the option. It's do I order something or do I make a cheese sandwich? That is usually the option.
Cheese sandwich is more cost effective.
It is.
Yeah, anyway,
it is.
Back to the episode. So I just think I don't. But let's I genuinely because that is a complaint of the show from what you've said, and it's come up a few times. And I personally don't have an issue with it. I think it leads to an interesting textured world. And again, we don't know if we're saying we don't know for sure that 70 is right. It is somewhere. It is the equivalent of somewhere between now and.
I was able to confirm it. It was 70 years. It's 70 years after that series.
Well, then I just think
in that conversation, I was able to finish the googling and find it.
I just think it makes sense then, doesn't it? Like I just don't. I say, so. do the comparison. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even things like this episode, they have the sort of like the racing cars. And it's like they had racing in the 1920s. Like early racing cars were actually really important to the development of technology that ended up in motor cars, and that's standard motor cars, and that's still true today. Motorsport is the pinnacle of the technology that ends up rolling through into vehicles, like standard home vehicles. And I don't just mean in terms of like speed and aerodynamics, but like in terms of fuel and efficiency in that sense, and how these things, I mean, those hybrid engines that are on current modern F1 cars, the technology that made those engines function so efficiently definitely worked its way into the hybrid sort of vehicles that those companies offer to consumers. It's not a massive stretch. And let's be honest, if biofuel is going to become a thing, motorsports are going to work it out first. There's enough money in the industry, for them to crack that code early. So even Asami having the sort of race car versions of the Sotomobiles, which little spoiler for trivia, designed on the early 1920s, 1930s race cars that did exist, like from early Formula One and other similar sports, motorsports. I don't understand the complaint, but I've never really found that, and I've also found it quite an interesting jump, and I think it says a lot about. Also, I think that's the other thing as well. The other thing that people are forgetting is the world was at war for 100 years. right? And when did the the sort of industrial revolution take place? War halts things, and then usually historically following war we get big jumps forward because the things that were all being held off jumped forward. I mean, I don't know, it's hard to I just think like there's just so much going on. Like obviously, in America in like the 1920s, which this show is kind of like, this show is definitely taking some inspiration from the 1920s, especially in like the music and the stylings and stuff. They were just coming. Well, when did the First War end? First World War end. That's a good First World War. I don't actually know the exact date. Yeah, it was 1918. Yeah. So by 1920s they were post-war and they were living it up, right? The roaring 20s, big success period, right? So, and that was just a sort of 4 or 5 year war, right? Like that, 1914 to 1918. Yeah, okay. So it's a 4-year war. Imagine what happens if the world got held back by a fucking 100-year war and then it ends. It's going to jump forward. There's going to be a period of prosperity. That peace will, allow manufacturing and production and all the things that were focused on war efforts to suddenly be being pointed at other ventures, things to propel, the tech and stuff. And I still think there's concerns, understandably, about the fact that Republic City's version of progress is just basically becoming westernized. I understand that, and that is valid.
That's separate to what we're talking about.
We're just talking about the actual tech progression itself. I think this is fine.
As we discussed last time, that is uncomfortable for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think it's something I clocked on my very first viewing. I was just like, oh, that's fun. But then when it was pointed out to me, I was like, that is a shame. But the show is in Republic City right now. It will eventually venture out into the world, and we'll get to see other areas. And I don't think Republic City has been depicted as this great place that everyone would want to live. So I think it's it may very well be as much of a criticism of sort of the way Western culture and civilization moved forward than anything else. So I'm not sure it's necessarily on the whole ends up being as problematic as it may seem on the surface. Because while the city certainly presents itself as being at the cutting edge, realistically, I don't think Republic City seems like a great place to live. It seems like everyone has had family. Like, Mako Bolin lived on the streets. Like, Asami's mother was murdered by a gang. Like, Republic City's got some issues, You can't even go watch a sports event without it being attacked by a terrorist group.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating though, and also I just again it's another reason why I think not the Western thing, going back to the technology thing, that because it's hard. I find it almost really hard because I've not seen the show as a whole. For all I know, series 2 is all it explores the other parts of the world where that's not happened. So I find it hard to judge. But it is funny because I did when it first came up, I think it was only in like episode 1 or 2.
Yes.
And we'd had quite a lot of traditional Airbender style settings, and so I was quite like, well, no, this and this feels very much not that. It is, based on what we've then had, though, it has been a lot of that, but it's quite hard for me to theorize on that or judge it until I've seen the whole, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll check back in on that idea, like, sort of a couple times a season and just see how we're feeling about it, and then we'll sort of maybe by the final episode we'll decide if we think it's a genuine problem, because I think it is true to say that certainly Republic City represents that, and that is not necessarily good, but Republic City hasn't been depicted positively, so let's see how the rest of the world has evolved with that in mind, because I've not watched this show, I don't think, since that was kind of brought up. to me as an issue. So I'll be really interested to see how the show going forward plays out, because like I said, we're not the show. It's 4 seasons. It's not entirely set in Republic City for that entire 4-season runtime. So once we do venture out into the wide open world, without trying to trying not to spoil anything for yourself, Chris, but once we do sort of step out into other areas of the world, it'll be easier to judge how the show handles that stuff. So we'll come back to that.
What other episode notes for this one specifically have you?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about the jealousy plot playing into this one. I felt quite naturally, but I was curious about it. So when we do the whole Korra believes he's dodgy, but no one quite believes her. They do a pretty convincing thing where, like, everyone's kind of mad at Korra. They're all like, I can't believe, this guy's taken us into his home and you're accusing him of being part of the Equalists. It works quite well. And at a certain point, Mako says maybe it's just a jealousy thing because Asami's like helping them out. And that's why Korra's doing it. And, if she continues to behave like this, it might end their friendship. How did you feel about that plot? Because obviously that involves a little amuse-bouche of love triangle bullshit.
Yeah, but it felt very. To be honest with you, as much as, and I really don't want to come across, and maybe I did in the other episode as the down on the love triangle bullshit guy. But because, for example, in this episode, I'd have kind of been annoyed if there wasn't a line about that, because it felt so true of the moment. It felt absolutely like that character would say that, and in fact, maybe some of the audience might have been saying it. So I'd have been almost more annoyed if they didn't address that. I think they did it exactly the right amount. I think just have the line, have her respond. And then we move on. That felt very true to life. It felt very much like I say, the thing that would be said. So no, I was actually with that. I was absolutely fine with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was very well placed. It made really a lot of sense. Like, I think some of the issue with the love triangle bullshit we had in the previous episode, I think what the mistake we made as well that's making us seem overly negative is that we've dubbed it love triangle bullshit. But I also enjoyed calling it a love rhombus. So
that train's left the station, my friend.
Yeah, I will continue to either call it love triangle bullshit or love rhombus forever. That's one or the other.
It's love triangle bullshit. You can't try and make love rhombus a thing now.
But we called it love rhombus in the past. I called it that in one of the first episodes.
I know, and that came up on the Discord the other day. But it's love triangle bullshit. You and I both know that.
Okay, fair enough.
But arguably, Dan, and arguably there were 2 moments of it actually, because and I think you were just kind of, so I think I cut you off there, but you basically saying that's one of the reasons we come across as negative on it, which is fair. Maybe we should switch to love rhombus. We'll try it out. We'll see. Yeah. I think arguably there were 2 moments, because Bolin really, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but there's a moment, I can't remember the context, but there's a moment fairly early on where Bolin makes Korra laugh. And it feels a little bit flirty. It feels a little bit like, ooh, like, it feels a little bit like he's winning her over in that regard, which I thought was, I noted that as well. So I think
not to make it too big of a topic at this stage, because obviously we're getting a bit long in the episode. But are you invested in any particular coupling at this point? Is there any particular pairing of this group that you're like, that's the pairing, that's the one I want to?
Yes, but it's not a love. Well, it could be. It's not necessary. I'm not necessarily bothered about whether it's romantic or not. But the pairing of that 4, I'm most interested in is Asami and Korra, and how their friendship grows and what relationship they go on to have. I think there's conflict there. There's difficulty. Right. There's Asami, has really tried, and Korra has been a bit standoffish, but now Korra can undoubtedly see, and they got on with the car race. That's in this episode where they have the car race, and you can see her warming to her, and Asami's beginning to get Korra on side. They're both now sort of away from family, kind of on their own. I think they've been characterized really interestingly, that balance of sort of independence but needing people. I think is really interesting. So I think, of all the pairings, and I'm it's not beyond the realm of possibility that could become a romantic thing. I don't particularly have a leaning as to whether I'd want it to be romantic or want it to be friendship, but of the four, the pairing I'm most interested in is them. And then maybe followed by, in a way, Marco and Bolin, and seeing how their relationship grows and develops.
Yeah, I think that's a fair one. I think because the show's put a lot of effort into sort of like slowly having Korra come round to Asami, and I think that's to their benefit. I think instead of them just immediately becoming friends very quickly, which felt very easy for Bolin, Mako, and Korra as a three. They seemed to get on really quickly. Obviously, Korra had an immediate aversion to Asami for sort of selfish teen love rhombus reasons. Had to resist the urge to say the other thing then. So we had a really good excuse to make Asami really have to work to make Korra want to be friends. And as a result, I think that's almost had an inadvertent, I'm not sure, well, maybe intentional, it's hard to tell, but it certainly had the effect of making that relationship one of the more interesting and sort of nuanced of them. It was pretty straightforward, easy, immediate friendship with the other two, whereas this one's automatically become more complex and is therefore maybe a bit more interesting as a result.
Yeah, I think that's inherently more intriguing. Where that goes now that in a way, thanks to Korra, she's sort of almost orphaned. I think that and even in this episode, Korra's reaction to that is she's going to need you. She's pushed Marco towards her as opposed to reaching out, directly. Not saying she won't, but I just think that's the most interesting of the pairings of those four characters.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting bit of growth for Korra too, for her to finally be Asami's just had a real, the empathy Korra shows there for Asami is a really big moment of growth for her. But then on top of that, pushing Marco towards Asami is also a really bizarrely selfless and quite good. And that's probably the biggest bit of growth we've had from Korra as a person since the show started. It's a great moment for sure. We do have something else we need to talk about before we get onto the trip very quickly, Chris. Because you said last week that you needed some Tano resolution. You're like, we have to do something with Tano. He just had his bending taken away. He's got to start his work on Mr. Robot in 12 months' time. So we got to. No, it's longer than that. But you wanted them to do something with that character. He was in this episode. He had a sequence. Was this? Okay. Let me reframe this just so you don't think I'm trying to imply anything by this. Assuming this is the last we see of the character. And I'm not suggesting it is, either way. But if this was the end for that character, was that enough for you, considering how you felt about it last week?
I'm happy for that to be a placeholder. But no, if that was the end of the character, I'd be disappointed. I'd be like, really? We're not going to do more with that? Because again, it's interesting. It's layered. I think that's a fascinating thing to explore.
Right.
And what happens to that character now, whose arrogant strength has partly come from bending abilities. Yeah. So I would be very. I was happy with it in a. You're probably wondering. So here's a bit of a scene to clarify this. But if we don't ever go back to that character, I'll be annoyed.
Fair, absolutely fair. A couple of other quick notes then, because I agree with you on that. What I think is really powerful about that is you do feel like it's amazing how quickly you go from that guy bloody deserves it, stupid cheater, to feeling really sorry for him in this episode. He just looks so down, and the performance on the voice acting is so good of making him seem just absolutely defeated. And then there's that moment of where where he says to Korra, go. He doesn't say these words, but there's a moment of go get him, you go kill him for me, basically. You go finish these guys off.
equally, I feel like we need, and again, this is why, like, if that's the end, I'll be disappointed. I feel like that's right in that moment, and it's right for Korra to be like that. But I feel like someone needs to be like, yeah, but you were a prick. Like,
right.
I almost, the fact that they're going to speak to him at the end, I was sort of like, that scene ends with him going off with Tenzin. Yes. I was kind of like, is he going off to get his account of what happened?
Yes.
Or is he going off to atone for cheating? Like, do you know what I mean? So
right. I think it's an account of what happened, is my assumption, because... Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I, in terms of what's interesting to me about that character and left unsaid, I kind of want that moment of, okay, you're trying to be a good guy, but you were a prick.
Right. Yeah. You got to get him for me. Is an interesting last line for him to utter. So I think you're right. I think there's still more to explore there. I really enjoyed two very quick last notes before we get onto the triv. Really enjoyed how quickly, no matter how much they gave Mr. Sato, Hiroshi Sato, all these lines of mustache-twirling villain, I'm actually an equalist and I'm going to capture you, Avatar, and my indestructible robots will defeat you, and what a great test, Amon will be pleased. The most villainous thing he says all episode is much, much later on, right towards the end, when he's talking about it, and he says, the worst part about this whole ruse has been watching my daughter traipse around with a firebending street rat like you. Oh, that was good writing. I was like, you didn't even need to do the rest of the stuff. I didn't need all the mustache twirling. That was way more villainous.
Yeah, for sure. That was
so much more powerful.
And kind of explains why we've never seen, because how much of that has been written off. Oh, Dad says you can do this. Oh, you get the money. I know he had that one scene in the factory, but even at the start of this episode, oh yeah, well she didn't tell her father about it. Oh yeah, but it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Right. We don't see any of those moments, and I think that's because they're hiding the fact that you can't really do those moments without at least revealing to the viewer that he's a bad guy.
Yes, correct, exactly right. So I thought that was interesting. A couple of other very quick things. I liked the intro. They did something different with it this week. It's the first time they've ever had someone that's not the presenter guy do it. I thought it was a really clever way to both sort of recap last week's episode and feel like a new scene from this week's episode, having Tarlok, doing a press release, essentially be the previously on. Tarlok doing a little press speech about the events in the previous episode. That's just very clever. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I'd agree. That was good.
And also, I pointed this out when I was watching it with Nadia. She was like, I don't think they care about this. But what's going on with this test track for the races? First of all, there's no runoff area. You want a runoff area. If the car goes off the track, you don't want it to be immediately smashed into 1,000 pieces, because you'll never find out why it went off the track. There are walls really close to some pretty high-speed turns. Just saying, as someone who watches F1, bad design. That's you're going to get someone killed, and you're not even going to find out why your car went off the road. Number two, Asami needs to lose her license. She parked in the pit lane entry. That is despicable. What, is the other guy just out there driving forever now? The other guy? Also, spinning that guy out, also stupidly dangerous. But even forgetting that for a second, because the heat of battle or whatever, fine. Parking in the pit lane entry so no one else can come in. Great. He's destined to just drive around the circuit forever. The other guy, then, is he?
I really thought the other guys were Marco and Bolin. Did I just completely
No, Marco and Bolin are cheering from the stands.
My bad. Yeah, my bad. No, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying I'm calling myself an idiot for not realising that wasn't them. Hold on. Yeah, very clearly not them. I think it's because I was surprised. I think the reason is when she's first let's give it a spin, I assumed they were going to race each other. So then when they were both in one car, my brain just went, there's two of them. There's two left. The two left must be in the other car. So, yeah.
Makes sense. But yeah, just from a design perspective, it's a weird racetrack, and also I think Asami needs to be told off for parking in the pit lane. Just saying. Um,
Yeah.
Very, very last thing, because I know we're a bit overrunning now, but I think we we rambled too much on wider topics this week. Sort of made us overrun a bit. But Lynn resigning at the end. We didn't talk about this. By the end of the episode, Lynn sort of said she's going to resign because she feels like she needs to do this her own way, which is going to require her to do it outside the law. What did we think about that as a development for Lynn?
I liked it as a moment. I thought it was a bit badass as a moment. I thought it was intriguing in terms of what it sets up. I think it's interesting that this show is continuing to set up multiple plots, and will presumably choose on when they're pulled on and when they're not. But yeah, I thought it was badass. I liked it.
Yeah, no, me too. I think it's an interesting setup for what's going forward. It sort of saves us the predictable thing, which is that after this other defeat, there is absolutely no way she wasn't getting fired anyway. You know, Tarlok has put himself in a real position of being able to blame her for everything that's gone wrong here. So,
and he and Tarlok would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I liked it.
Yeah, makes sense, and it's an exciting little tease for where it's going next. So yeah, cool. Let's do the triv, Chris.
Let's triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia. I'd still do the give you some trivia thing, but at some point I do need to stop doing that. I can't. Is that forever?
No, I like it. I like it. To be honest with you, like you're happy to continue with this Daniel Radcliffe glasses bullshit, so you can continue with give you some trivia as well.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Chris, because did you know that during the Harry Potter movies, Daniel Radcliffe went through 160 pairs of glasses?
I did know that, Dan. I did know
you
that.
You did? Oh, okay, cool. You've heard that before, have you?
Once or twice.
Okay, fair enough.
In my fucking mind's eyes, I fall asleep at night.
I do like the idea that you wake up in a cold sweat, like, glasses! Anyway, there was a little hint for this episode's outcome, Chris, in the very first episode, when we got a glimpse of Amon in the first episode. At the end of it, they sort of cut to him as a villainous character. You know, the Avatar is staying in Republic City. We'll have to accelerate our plans. You know, that scene. In the background, you can clearly see the schematics for the mech tanks that Hiroshi uses here. In that scene,
cool,
pretty cool detail, if you ask me. Good work, team production of Korra team people.
Good work, show.
Mm-hmm. The push daggers that came out of Lin Beifong's arms are similar to an Indian weapon known as a katar. I'm looking up what a katar looks like. It does look like that. Very good. Good spot, Korra fans who put that in the trivia. I should have clicked on that beforehand, so that surprise didn't occur on in the podcast. Fine.
That's fine, I think.
Let's see. When Bolin jumps into Sato's pool, he exclaims "Earthbending bomb," which apparently might be which might be a nod to Katara's waterbending bomb, which is what she says as she jumps in the water in the Serpent's Pass episode of the original series. Like Zuko, Asami chooses to join the Avatar after denouncing her father's cruelty. Coincidentally, they both turn against their respective fathers in a manner that involves lightning. Asami turns against her father using an electrified glove. Zuko retaliated against his father with lightning redirection. That's true. I doubt that's intentional, because good bit of George Lucas style. Oh, it's poetry. They rhyme. So yeah, good work.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking of Lucas. Yeah, I don't think that is a deliberate thing, but it's nice. It's cool.
Yeah. Who doesn't like it when these things sort of have a weird accidental coalescence in terms of some of the imagery? Yeah, it's good. No problem. I suppose I couldn't rule it out that it was intentional, but if I was guessing, I would guess not. The episode originally included Bolin comedically sharing in Mako and Korra's amazement at Asami's swift takedown of her father. So she took down her father, Bolin had another one of his one-liners, but the moment was cut to maintain the scene's emotional consistency. Good choice. Agreed. Bolin had enough funny lines this episode. He didn't need another one that might have stepped on Asami's moment. So yeah, would agree.
Fair.
The first and only time that the opening newsreel features a speech by someone that isn't the narrator. So yeah,
that's the only time that happens.
I'm realizing now as I read that's technically spoilers, isn't it? Because that's giving away they don't do it again. But yeah, that's the only time that it occurs.
Nice.
And it's the only episode besides from Welcome to Republic City, the first one, to not have a recap by that character, because obviously that one didn't have a recap because it was the first one. So yeah.
But we did then, didn't we hear on the radio? Like, we do then hear that character in this episode, don't we?
Maybe, yeah, maybe, but he doesn't do the intro. There's only two episodes he doesn't do an intro for, and it's the first episode and this one.
I remember thinking, I remember when the voice appeared, going, "Oh, okay, well, they're still in the episode then. That's cool."
Yes, yeah. No, I'm sure he is. I wouldn't doubt that for a second. But last thing, which we've already covered actually, but I'll be damned if I'm going to skip an opportunity to say it's time, everyone, for our world famous segment. Sotomobiles exist. Sotomobiles in this episode were designed to look like the early motorsport cars from the 20s and 30s. That is true. No specific model, though. I tried looking, and it seems that back then, design was quite ubiquitous. You know, all of those cars looked very similar. So, you're designing it to look like one, you're kind of designing it to look like all of them. So there's not a specific model that they've matched it to, more just the general vibe of those early 20s and 30s motorsport vehicles, and it's pretty cool. They look good. They look really neat on the racetrack. I like seeing them side by side. Yeah, thumbs up.
Yeah. No, it works. I liked it.
Me too. Right, so that's all the Trev. Are we saying goodbye to the good folks? Any final thoughts,
take
Chris?
us home. Where, Dan? If I wanted to, my final thought is this, Dan. If I wanted to support this podcast. If I wanted to, no pressure. But if I wanted to, how would I go about doing that, my friend?
Well, I'm going to go the opposite way, Chris, and I'm going to say absolutely pressure. You must all do this immediately, or this podcast ends tomorrow. That's my stance this week. I'm going hard. Don't you dare just give $1. We need at least more than that. I don't know. I couldn't even for this bit suggest an amount more. You can give more, but yes, at least $1 gets you access to our Patreon, where you get episodes of this podcast a week ahead of their normal iTunes, Spotify public release. Why aren't you doing that? Absolutely outrageous. Why aren't you going on?
Dan, if someone didn't want to give $1 and didn't want to do that, how else could they support us?
Well, I mean, they obviously want to give us $1, but I mean, in some insane world where they're not heeding my call for money, because I'm a greedy man, then they should go support us by heading over to all the various platforms that we're on and liking the podcast.
What are we on, Dan?
Interacting with it and reviewing it in any way, shape, or form. Because when you do that, it tells that platform you enjoyed it, and it's more likely to share it with other people.
But Dan, if they don't want to review, can they just leave a like?
I mean, they could just leave a like. Like, a lot of the time in app, you can just sort of leave stars and likes and thumbs ups, depending on what platform you're using. You can. You can also tell a friend.
And if they don't want to leave a like, then fuck them.
Well, I mean, look, if they're not, I don't want to put too fine a point on this, Chris, but if we don't get more patrons this week, I'm just gonna stop doing the podcast. That's what I'm saying.
You'll feel so guilty if this episode comes out and we get patrons. You won't even be pleased. You'll be like,
no, I won't. I'll be really upset. Please don't do that, anyone. Obviously, little addendum. Dan doesn't mean any of what he's saying right now. Please just give what you can if you can and if you'd like to, and we'd appreciate it very much. But you don't have to. Don't ever feel pressure. That's not a thing. I'm doing a bit. It's a joke. It's not meant to be taken seriously. So yeah, absolutely. Give us money, or like next week we're gonna open it up and it'll be like, "Welcome to Analyzing Avatar, sponsored by Gatorade. Don't you all want to drink Gatorade?" And it's gonna be ads top to bottom. We'll mention Korra like once, but it will just be an advert. 45 minutes to an hour of just us, naming random brands. And they won't even be brands you're interested in or brands from the country we live in, because for some reason I've already chosen Gatorade as one of them. A drink I don't think I've ever actually tried.
No, me neither.
Actually, no, when I went to New York, I might have had a Gatorade. I might have been curious enough to try. But anyway, Support us in all of the ways previously mentioned. The other thing you can do, of course, is to keep listening. Yeah. Do that.
Well, what about if they wanted to contact us, Dan? What about if they wanted to get in touch to tell us their favourite flavour of Gatorade?
Yeah, to enter our Gatorade competition, 20-year supply of Gatorade. Yeah, of course. Well, you can do that in all the usual ways, and of course, you want to comment on the podcast. Again, I'd be outraged if you didn't. YouTube.com/nothing-but-static-UK. You can comment on the specific episode that you have a comment relating to. So let's say you were offended deeply by our suggestion that the Sotomobiles in this episode were designed based on the motor cars of the 1920s, or the brilliant piece of trivia that Daniel Radcliffe went through 160 pairs of glasses during the making of the Harry Potter films. If you've got some sort of objection to any of that, you can go put it there. Or you can send us an email, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. You can contact us there. Yeah, that's all the ways you can do it.
There you go.
Oh, also, Raphodraws. Go support Raphodraws.
Yes.
I'm not even going to make a joke around that one. You should just go do that. Instagram.com/Raphodraws, spelled RAPHODRAWS. That's on Instagram, and launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws to get access to like Raphos, all like YouTube and Redbubble, and there's just a ton of really good art. Rapho supplies us with that piece of art of Appa in front of the sun that is the key art for this podcast. But there's so much other great stuff on there for a bunch of different Venoms. There's also like an online you can purchase online like a graphic novel or something like a webcomic. I've had a look at it. It looks great. There's phone cases with the art on. There's like cups and mugs with the art on. You go support an artist that deserves it. So go support Rapho.
Absolutely. I was gonna keep this joke. In fact, you know what? I will keep this joke going. I will ride this joke till the end, Dan. Who have you been, Dan?
I've been Dan Doolan. Who have you been, Chris?
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you guys next week when we sit down to review When Extremes Meet. Are you going to make me do it again, or are you happy?
No, we'll do it again.
Christ, I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you next week when we sit down and watch When Extremes Meet. I can't believe you can never do it. Your refusal to commit to a slightly different ending, where you make me do it again if we do it different, is weird.
Yeah, I didn't used to do it that way, but yeah, no, that's become a thing. I don't know why.
You're a bit of a traditionalist.
Are you still recording?
Hmm.
Are you still recording now?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, same. There's been too much add-on. Let's do it again.
No! Just no! This
One
could just
more
go
time.
At the end. We
One
occasionally
more
do
time.
add-ons on this.
One more time.
Fucking hell. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
We'll see you next week when we sit down to watch... I've forgotten what the episode's even called. When Extremes Meet. What we're going to do, When Extremes Meet, that's what we're going to watch. Enjoy it. That's the next episode of Korra. You could have probably just Googled it. Google it.
Well, that was a depressing end, but... Bye!
Well, yeah. What do you want from me? Bye. I'm tired, Chris.
Bye.